When you think of robotics, what do you see? A machine that looks a bit like you and me? You might think about R2D2 from Star Wars, or Ava in Ex Machina. These robots do look a bit like us. They are able to move by themselves, make their own decisions, and are able to communicate with us. In fact, robots can come in many different shapes and sizes. They don't need to look like humans. In fact, most don't. And most are not able to speak back to us. How would you define robots then? A robot is an autonomous machine capable of sensing its environment, carrying out computations to make decisions, and performing actions in the real world. What a robot looks like depends on its purpose. Most of the robots are used for industrial purposes. As a type of robots, industrial robots are the embodiment of advanced technologies integration of industry, electronics, computers, and automatic control in industrial production, and have therefore become central features in modern manufacturing. While advanced industrial countries such as the United States, Japan, and Germany have traditionally been dominant players in this field, China has played an increasingly important role in the adoption of industrial robots, to a point that they are now forming a global dominance in the industry of robots. But why is a country that seems to have so much labor force focusing heavily on the integration of robots? China has always been seen as the world's factory, mainly because it was built upon the cheap labor of hundreds of millions of manufacturing workers. But this is changing. China has been experiencing the combination of a shrinking labor force with rapidly rising labor costs over the last decade. This resulted in an increase in both economic pressure and political support for the growth of the Chinese robotics industry. China's past economic growth was in part driven by a phenomenon called demographic dividend, a rise in the working age population as a share of China's total population. However, China is rapidly approaching a demographic deficit. China's working age population, which starts at the age of 15 and ends at the age of 64, is declining both in absolute size and as a share of China's overall population. This means that there is less supply for the growing demand of workers. A result of this is more expensive labor forces. Besides the size of these labor forces, the skill composition of workers is also changing, mainly due to the large-scale expansion of enrollments in college from 1999 to 2009. This increased the number of college students by an average of 18% each year. People that went to college are less keen to work as manufacturers. Although it is impressive to see that the college education share doubled for the manufacturing sector within a decade, this change is actually smaller than that for the whole labor force, likely reflecting the difficulties that Chinese manufacturers have in attracting workers with college education. At the same time, China's government has identified the robotics industry as a strategically important sector and has initiated various programs and subsidies to encourage the use of robots as a way of transforming and upgrading China's manufacturing industries. As a strategically important sector, the government aims to increase its global market share of high-end robotics to 45%. The Made in China 2025 program set production goals of 100,000 industrial robots with a density of 150 robots per 10,000 workers by 2020. In addition, back in 2016, the MIIT, the National Development and Reform Commission, and the Minister of Finance jointly launched the Robotics Industry Development Plan to promote robot applications to a wider range of fields, including the service sector. This plan set several targets by 2020, including 100,000 industrial robots annually produced by domestic technology and annual sales of around $4.4 billion for surface robots. These plans to advance in science and technology are believed by many to be essential for China's rise as a world power, as revealed by the following quote in the National Plan of 2016. One important reason why China fell into backwardness and took beatings in the modern era is that the previous industrial revolutions slipped through our fingers, leaving us with weak technology and a weak state. To realize the great rejuvenation of the Chinese nationhood that is the Chinese dream, we must make genuine use of science and technology. This revolutionary force and lever of power in the highest sense. The changes of China towards an industry that is focused on robotic labor forces made it the biggest user of robotics in the world. The industrial robotics market in China achieved strong growth with a new record of 243,300 installations in 2021, a rise of 44% compared to the previous year. These preliminary data have been published by the International Federation of Robotics. It is clear that China is heavily investing in robots, and with increasing expenses on labor forces, this also seems to be necessary as China is dominating sectors such as the automotive and electronics industries that are known for a lot of robotic labor. China has been the largest national producer of automobile units since 2008. Indeed, since 2009, annual production of automobiles in China has exceeded that of the United States and Japan combined. China also clearly dominates the global electronics industry. Over 70% of the world's computers and electronics are made in China. These industries in China seem likely to keep expanding, which implies that China will become an even more significant user of robots. But are there threats for this growing size of robots? One of the concerns for the increase in using industrial robots in manufacturing would be the fact that people would be replaced by robots, and that unemployment would rise as a result of growing replacements. This could lead to scenarios that are well imaged in the game of Detroit Become Human, in which a majority of the population is becoming unemployed because of the androids that are taking over all of the tasks. However, the threat of job replacement is apparently not a high priority concern for the government and its citizens. Policies are more motivated by the challenges of labor shortages and rising wages, as well as the imperative to lead a new wave of industrial revolution. At the same time, state authorities aim to boost employment and entrepreneurial opportunities among college graduates, for example by creating new professions such as robotics engineering technician. The profession focuses on the research and development of control algorithms and operating systems for robots, as well as the use of digital simulation technology. While old jobs seem to disappear, new ones are created. And while the robots are a good addition in the current situation, an ever-increasing amount of robots is probably going to have consequences somewhere in the future.